Hello and welcome to this edition of SFG Top Producer Podcast. I'm Mark White, grain merchandiser for SFG. With me today is Kent Watson and Scott Goetz from the feed department. We'll go over a few things that are going on currently. We'll start with the grain. We had a WASDE report this past week on Wednesday. Supply and demand. They left the acres alone. They won't adjust those. We're still going off the March intended acres. They won't have new acre numbers until the June 30th report, when at that point FSA and NASS will have their acres updated. It won't be a final planted date, but acres, but it'll be pretty close. So we're still going off the, I guess what you might say, surprisingly low number of acres that were expected to be planted. I think everybody in the industry expects those numbers to increase. All the things are lining up for that. The prices are good. The new crop prices are on the high side. The weather has allowed timely planting in most areas. The Dakotas might be an exception. It's been very dry, particularly in North Dakota. And so a lot of those guys are kind of sitting there waiting for rain. They haven't had any measurable rain in close to a year in some areas. And that's hard to believe, but that's where they're sitting. In Iowa, our area, our south central Iowa area, moisture hasn't been a big issue. Matter of fact, the southern edge down in the Appanese County, if anything, they've been on the wet side, and a little unusual for the rest of the country, but they're still working at getting their planting done. In the central and northern parts of our area, I think planting is all but done. Stuff went in relatively well. The stand counts seem to be pretty good. The exception, what I'm hearing, it's outside of our trade area, but it's primarily in the western Iowa region down through southwest Iowa into Missouri. They're seeing some reduction in corn stands, probably due to the extra dry conditions that the crop went in, and some of that seed laid in dry dirt. It's still coming up, but I think we've learned in the business the last 10 years, a late emerger is a weed. If that crop doesn't come up within 3 or 4 days, that late planted or that late emerging corn plant becomes a weed almost. Takes nutrients but doesn't provide back the return that it should. So on the WASDE report, corn could be termed bearish. They raised the carry out a little bit. They played with the numbers, and I say that tongue in cheek, but it's kind of true. I think sometimes they want to make sure they come up with a number that suits them maybe. But they lowered the exports going into the next year, which a lot of that hinges on whether our competitors are able to raise and harvest a crop, and that would be Brazil right now with their Safrinha crop, which is under stress from lack of rain, and now they're in their July time frame down there if you compare it to our country. So that crop needs moisture, and it's not getting it, but it's getting a lot of heat. So we know what happens when that goes on, and they keep pushing the rain off another week. Before long, it's maybe going to be too late. On the flip side, all too often, that rain appears overnight maybe, and the markets take that to heart. So those are things coming up. On beans, it was a somewhat neutral report. They didn't change a lot. They're predicting there was some concern looking into the 21 ending inventory. We would be worse off than we are today. Right now, they're saying with trend line yields and the acres that we thought were going to be planted, we'd actually raise that just a little, like 20 million bushel, not a lot, but it's kind of important when you get down into those numbers. If you go back on corn, the carry out of the 1920 crop was just short of 2 billion bushel. Right now, they're estimating this year to be 1.257. Next year, 1.507. So we're on a recovery there with the corn. and beans are somewhat similar, more dramatic drop. 1920 ending crop was 525 million bushel, somewhere around 120 for this year. They're predicting 140 for next year. So if that holds true, the market should stay in relatively good condition. We'll just have to wait and see. A couple of things that I did look up. If you go back to the month of April, July corn was $1.26 higher at the end of the month than it was the first of the month. If you go back a year ago, July corn was $3.11. And so that means we're $3.62 higher on the 1st of May. What a deal. That's more than double price. That's quite a thing. Beans, similar. A year ago, the 1st of April or 1st of May, beans were $8.50 locally. On the 1st of May this year, we closed at $15.34. That's a gain of $6.84. So that's the cause for a lot of optimism out in the country. Following the WASDE report, we're taping this on a Friday. Thursday, yesterday, we saw a limit move down in the old corn and a pretty healthy decrease in the beans. This morning, we're having a rebound, and corn's back on the positive side. Beans are up in the 20-cent range. So I don't think we can say the game's over by any means. Have we put the top in on the old crop? Possibly on the corn. Very good possibility there. Beans, I think it'll still depend on our summer supply and how far these interior plants are going to have to go to secure the beans they need. Crushers are making a huge return right now on these beans, and the oil is very valuable. As long as that continues, they'll keep out there looking for beans so they can keep their plants running full speed. So that means good things on the grain side. Kent, maybe that doesn't mean such a good thing on the feed side. That means these producers are going to have to figure out how to make higher price rations work in their program. So what are you seeing?
Well, that's very true. We've got to have to be extremely efficient with what we feed our animals to keep in the business here, because as you're saying, it doesn't look like these commodities are going to go down anytime in the near future. So we got to look at efficiency that we can have some control over that maybe can help us get through these times. So one of the I'm going to talk about two products that maybe help us with these efficiencies. The first would be our creep feed. Creeping these calves maybe a little earlier than what we normally would. It might be a good way of adding some extra pounds. Probably be as cheap as you can, comparing it to try to do it on a traditional grain mix type ration. Like I said, the feed efficiencies of these commercial creeps are double or half as much as the grain mixes. So, and now would be a good time to maybe lock some of those creep tons in and prices. We have booked ours and contracted some creep, but it's only through the end of September, because our suppliers basically couldn't lock their ingredients up either. So, and if we had to today go in and replace these tons, it would be significantly higher. So it might be a good idea to take a look and get your creep needs taken care of now. The other product you don't hear a whole lot about, but it's something that you get an extremely good return on your investment, and that is hay preservative. We have a product called Bulletproof. It's a actual preservative. It's not an inoculant. It goes on at the baler or when you're chopping, and it starts acting immediately. And so what it does is reduce the heat, and thus you don't see near the shrinkage that you would normally get. They basically guarantee that you're not going to, you can bale basically up to 25% moisture, which definitely increases your window for maybe getting in and getting that hay baled earlier, and the quality will be improved. And so, generally they say that you get about a 10 to 15% shrink if you try to traditionally just dry down hay to its, to baling levels. And when you think about that, that's a $100 hay crop per ton. That's $5, $10, or $10 to $15 a ton savings. So, and the cost is around $4.50 to $5 a ton to put this preservative on. But you're going to also, we're looking at some situations right now where this hay crop might not be so great because we had dry conditions early, and then it's been awfully cool. And this hay is not growing, the pasture is not growing as well as we were hoping by this time. And so we need to keep everything that we can grow. So again, if you have any questions about these two products, be sure and give us a call. But it's two products that we have control over that can definitely help your efficiency in feeding these animals. So that's all I have, Mark.
Well, thanks, Kent. That's some useful information. Let's move up north to Scott, and you can kind of give us an update on your area and what you're seeing.
I think most of the crops are planted up here and they've all emerged fairly nicely. We got a nice shower last weekend. We could still use some heat. Most of our pastures and hay ground are really lagging around here. This is a good time to go out and spot spray some weeds and brush, which rob pastures of valuable nutrients and moisture. We have a large selection of pasture chemicals to handle whatever you need. So give us a call and we can get you matched up with whatever product will do the best job for what you're trying to kill. We still need to be keeping an eye on our cows, especially cows out to pasture. We need to make sure they're not losing condition. With the weather that we've been having, a lot of these pastures are really struggling to keep up with the cows. If they're not keeping up, you might have to supplement them or feed them some hay. If you got the ability, you can rotate them out. This will give them fresh grass, and it allows for your used pastures to catch back up again, so they're not getting grubbed down early in the year like this. Flies are out too, so you need to make sure your fly control is out if you're using fly control. If not, you can use face and back rubs. Anything you do to help control flies would be well worth the money. We do have a nice selection of fly control products available at most of our locations. And like Kent said, this hay's kind of struggling this year. It's not going to be too long until this alfalfa is going to be ready to cut. Along with the dry weather out west that they've been having and our weather conditions, it's really driving the hay market up. A little dry fertilizer could really give you a good return on your investment this year. If you can get some P&K down with some micronutrients after your first cutting, it can really give your alfalfa a boost. Any extra bales you can get this summer might be mighty valuable come next winter. So contact any of the SFG locations and our agronomists can get recommendations and help you get set up for what you need for your hay fields that you have. That's all I got for you, Mark.
Well, thanks, Scott. Your comment about spraying pasture, I think, is dead on. My home farm, I've got a 60-gallon sprayer in the back of a side-by-side with a boomless sprayer. I can go out there and spray 12 acres at a crack, so it's pretty easy. In the evening, go out and spray a couple tanks. And I've been doing that for 3 years, and I'm seeing a tremendous return on investment. That grass doesn't have all those weeds to compete with. And while you're doing that, you can pick up some brush species and get rid of them also. So I think any producer would find value in doing a little pasture spraying. Well, that wraps it up for today's edition. Thank you for joining us. We welcome you to come to our website at your leisure, sfgiowa.com, and look at our blogs. We post every week, and you can watch the latest editions of not only the Feed and Grain podcast, but also the agronomy. They do one every other week also. Thank you again.